Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Profitable Christian Business Podcast. I'm so pleased to have my guest, Edward Robinson, with me today. Edward and I have known each other just a little while. He's an expert in a lot of things financial, so we're going to dive into that. We're also going to share some of his faith journey, which is always the most exciting thing for me. I love to hear how people have intertwined their faith throughout their business, because it should be intertwined throughout our entire life. And Edward's going to share a little bit of that story with us as well. So without further ado, Edward, kind of give us a brief introduction.
Well, hello, I'm Edward Robinson. I serve as a financial advisor with a big old company called Thrivent, big Christian company. And I've served in the past in many different venues. I've been a pastor. I do conferences, speaking, engagements, and so on and so forth. Some of my proudest moments are this time that I get to spend at home. I have a wife and I have 5 kiddos. I got 4 boys and 1 girl.
Wow.
The girl came last, so God bless her. She does have a lot of protection and dad and brothers. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. So you can find me somewhere between on the lane of finance and the intersection of the lane of finance and faith, always, because I'm always talking Bible or business somehow.
Nice. And I have a feeling we're going to talk about how those two kind of intersect, the biblical principles around finances during this interview. So that's really, really cool. I like to start off every interview with some lighthearted questions. It's funny because sometimes they start out being lighthearted and we end up getting deep. So if it goes deep, that's all good too.
Yeah.
If you could choose one superpower to use in your daily life as a financial planner and as a conference speaker, what would that be and how would that help you?
Well, when this question of superpowers come up, for some reason, I've always been sort of most identified with a desire to be Professor X of X-Men. Yeah, so the mind reader. And I think the thing about that is key, that maybe people don't pick up on, is the ability to empathize. It is Professor X's empathy that has him always at war with Magneto, because he empathizes both as a mutant and as a human. So he empathizes with both sides because of his ability to read their minds and understand their emotions. So what that has to do with what I do, if I can understand someone better in the work that I do, I can serve them better. And so that's a little bit about that.
Yeah. Wow. I'm an X-Men fan. That was my favorite comic book growing up. So
yeah,
I really love that you said that. Just a little bit more about that is with your finances, a lot of people have these inherent limiting beliefs and things that they've have around money that maybe they're raised with and things like that. So having that ability to know, like, they're saying this, but I can really know that they're thinking this would be a really good.
It would be very helpful. It'd also be helpful in being able to tie someone's current financial practices, for example, to their childhood. Because maybe what they're reflecting in the present is a correction of the past. And what I mean by that is they could be trying to not become their parents, or they could be just practicing and doing a copy and paste of exactly what their parents did. Or they could be operating out of a place of fear. We all have those things about us that lead us to why we do what we do in terms of how we spend our money.
Now this wasn't planned. I didn't send you this question, but because I really haven't gotten to the heart of the word profitable on the podcast. And I thought, what a better opportunity than somebody that's in the financial realm right now. And it just came top of mind. So when I want everyone, the audience, everyone that's listening, to know, when I say the word profitable, there's a first and a second. So the first thing is profitable for the kingdom, right? How are you reflecting Jesus in your business, right? How are you making it profitable for the kingdom? Yes. Edward and I would love to help you find ways to make your business more profitable, but overall, we want everything to be more profitable for the kingdom. And when you have the resources to do that, you can have more impact for the kingdom, for your communities, for your families, etc. So I just want to let everybody know a little bit of the motivation, because they never really came out and said that after I changed the name. So
that's good. That's good background, good context.
Yeah, nice. Next question. You're from Buffalo, New York.
Correct.
But you now live in Charlottesville, Virginia. Can you tell me what you liked most about Buffalo, New York, and now what is something that you love about Charlottesville?
2 things come to mind about Buffalo. One is the grit of trying to get through the winters. And somehow the cold winters unify you, no matter if you're white or black, rich or poor. In Buffalo, the cold winters sort of unify the community because you have to band together to get through them. And so I kind of miss the grit of that,
Mm.
just the grittiness of being from Buffalo. And then the other side of it is food. I miss Buffalo food. We have some of the best pizza around, and we would argue with anybody on that. That's just
Wow. New
the
York,
thing. And of
Chicago,
course, we
you
got
take them on.
wings. Yeah, we can take them on. We can take them on. And of course, we got wings and so on and so forth. So a thing called a steak sub was also prevalent in Buffalo. So I miss some of the food. In regards to Charlottesville specifically, I would say as I look around, if you were to drive through Charlottesville, one of the things that you'll notice is the mountains, views of the mountains. And so it's a very peaceful place. And it's not as gritty or crazy as Buffalo. And so you get to enjoy some of the spiciness of Buffalo and then some of the sweetness of Charlottesville. And that's kind of how they balance out.
Nice. So Charlottesville, I'm imagining, I've never been to Buffalo, but from what you're saying, Buffalo winters are brutal. It sounds like, but Charlottesville, what's the temperature difference in the winter? Is that?
It still gets somewhat cold in Virginia. Virginia is this weird zone of like kind of being in the South, but not, you know what I mean? And kind of being northeast, but sort of kind of not really. And so we still, Virginia can still get some snow, but it's not nearly as much. Remember, Buffalo, if you look at where it is on the map, it's hugged up right against Lake Erie. And so we would get something called lake effect snow in the winter times. All the snow would come off of the lake and hit us pretty hard. And so that's a little bit of the difference. Down here in Virginia, it's just not it doesn't get as cold in terms of temperature.
I lived for a brief time in Kentucky, so I imagine the climate's probably similar to Kentucky. Again, one of those states that claims the South, right? But they're really kind of north.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, nice. So 5 kids, you said.
Absolutely, yeah.
That makes you real, and you have a busy career. So how do you find time to relax, number one? And what do you like to do when you do get a time to relax?
Yeah, I think we do the typical stuff. I watch movies with the kids, we play, we do all of those typical things that you would do. I think the thing that might be unique, maybe not unique, but just I'm always working on their character. And so even if we're watching a movie, right, we could be watching a Marvel movie. We've enjoyed plenty of those. If there's a moment in a movie, for example, where Thor is arguing with his dad, Odin, in the movie, and he says to his father, "You're an old fool." Okay, well, we got to pause that moment, right? Because we got to talk about this moment. We got to break this down. And so I spend a lot of time breaking down scenes with my kids. I told you the boys are older. My daughter, she's less than a year old, so I haven't had the chance to do that with her yet. But with my boys, I'm always sitting down, breaking down scenes with them. And whatever we're doing, it could be a scene in a movie. It could be a scene that just happened in front of us, right? We're at a store, we see something, and I want them to understand, because what you're going to leave with your children, hopefully, is your perception. You want them to be able to look at something and hopefully see the things that you see through the lens of scripture and the way that you understand the world. And so you're going to leave a worldview with them. And so that's sort of what we do. We try to include that in just about everything we do.
Wow. So you're giving them discernment. I really want to, this is kind of where one of those things where I said it's lighthearted, but we could kind of go deep. Let's go deep a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because there's the flip side of never letting your kids experience anything secular. Like if there's a possibility if there's something bad on there, we're just not, you just can't see it. But I think you're setting them up for disaster. When that's just my personal opinion, because when they become adults and they get exposed to it, they do not know how, they don't have the discernment and know how to react. Right. I love what you're doing as far as educating them and giving them that ability to discern what is right and what is wrong before that, while in these adolescent years.
Yeah, for sure. It's micro exposure, right? What you don't, like you said, you don't want them to be completely shocked. The world is coming for the mind of your child. And so what we've done is we don't overexpose them, but we don't not expose them at all either, right? Sometimes I say, depending on what type of parent you are, but for the most part in general, it is the job of the mom to protect the kid and the job of the dad to prepare the kid. And so what you don't want to do, whether you're mom or dad, you don't want to get to the place where you're sort of preparing the road for your child. You want to prepare your child for the road. What is the difference between the two? One type of parent goes out and removes all the rocks, fills in all the potholes with cement, tries to smooth out the road for the ease of the child. And the other parent looks at the child and tries to teach them, train them, educate them, discipline them, and disciple them in a way so that when they get on the rough road, when they hit the rocks, when they hit the potholes, when the thorns from the bushes on the side sort of scrape their legs, they're able to handle some of the rough patches of just life.
Yeah. Yeah. That is awesome. I'm glad that we went there, because I feel like that is good information for especially, young parents that have young kids. Like, parenting is a rough job, right? I've just had one. You have five. So your job is tougher than mine, just honestly. But yeah, so hopefully you can use what Edward just said, and I think that's the right way to go, is prepare them and don't overly protect them.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
I always tell people, I said, if it was up to Mary, Jesus would have never made it to the cross.
Ooh, yeah.
Because she's a good mother.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
So if she could have, she would have talked him out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Or tried to protect him from it. But it was his responsibility to the world in order to see to it that he made it to the cross in order for grace to be distributed by sacrifice. But it would not have been his mother's desire.
No. Yeah. I think any mother that might be watching this would agree with you. Like, that would have been very hard thing to do, and most of them would admittedly not been able to do it.
And rightfully so, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Rightfully so. Yeah.
All right, now we get to it's a staple of every podcast interview. It's the fill in the blank question, and your fill in the blank question is: faith is the foundation of my business because it helps me blank.
It helps me to stay away from the idolatry of money.
Ooh, nice. Yeah.
It is easy for money to become an idol. It is easy for us to orient the entirety of our lives around money.
Mm-hmm.
And so faith keeps you anchored and doesn't allow the winds and the ups and downs of how finances work, the ins and outs of it, to sway your heart, your emotions. Your soul stays anchored in the things that matter the most. And obviously that is the Lord. And so it keeps the Lord at the centerpiece. Otherwise, you're chasing and bowing down to the idol of money. And the idol, where money was last week might not be where it is next week. And so you'll find yourself constantly moving and constantly chasing. And so we have a way of being able to hustle hard and work hard without worshiping in a way that is idolatrous.
I love that. Can we circle back to kind of the family aspect again? Because I love your perspective on this. When I was growing up, there were so many conversations. I financially unstable household, right? There were so many conversations about money. And I feel like us raising our daughter, we did not have many of those financial conversations in front of her because we didn't want that to be what it was about, right?
Yeah.
So I just love your perspective on that and raising children and talking about money.
Yeah, we talk about it often. It's because so much of human behavior is controlled by where the money is.
Yeah.
See, the study of economics is really the study of a mixture of finance and human psychology. It's a study of how people spend money. That's really what it's about, which is how people spend money is a revelation of who they are. And so what I try to do with my kids is try to get them to understand this is the way of the world, especially, with the sons that I have, because I know an expectation is coming upon them to provide and do all these particular things, right? And then my daughter will have another set of expectations of her, but it all involves money. And so we have conversations about it, right? Because I want them to understand cost. I want them to understand work. I want them to understand some of these things. And so I rope them in. I don't burden them with the conversation, but I do make sure that they understand that things cost and that we have to work for certain things. Because the thing that I'm trying to mitigate is this sense of entitlement that can happen with children when they divorce what they get from the cost of the thing. And so I never want my children to divorce the gift from the cost. For example, if you never fully understand the cost that Christ has paid, then you can never fully appreciate it. If you just run around and grace is free, and I mean, it is free to us, but it costs a man his life.
Yeah.
And so what I try to communicate to my children is that everything that you see, somebody created, and it costs something. And then the flip side of that is I'm trying to get them to produce and not just consume. Right. And so what I want for them is to to understand that their creative mind can come up with things that others would pay for. So we do gift our children, we do all of that, those normal things, but it doesn't come without a conversation. Because the flip side of it is I don't want my children to look at me as the sole source of income. Now, I am a benefactor. I am their father. I will always be available to them, but I've turned my children's face out into the world for them to understand how the market works. And that's where they can produce value and not just get value.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you said earlier about preparing and not overly protecting, right?
Correct.
And I have, I mean, maybe it's been this way, and it just kind of seems like it's been going this like deeper in this way. The entitlement, I think it's a growing epidemic.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
So I love that you're doing that. Now let's transition to your story. So you can start wherever you want to. We just want to know like how you got into entrepreneurship, like, and kind of take us steps along until you get to where you are now.
Yeah, so I'll go back maybe 2000 I'll go back 2010, that's about 14 years ago. I went to college, went to Bible college. The whole point was to get into ministry. I ended up doing that several years later. But my initial goal in terms of profession was to be a pastor. And so I served as a pastor. In fact, the last 5 years or so, I've served as a pastor. So from 2019 up until 2024, I served completely in a full-time pastoral ministry. One of the things that happened to me going back to 2014, 2015, I was a part of a church that was planting churches in urban communities and poor communities on purpose. The trouble with that is we never had enough money. We never had enough money. So my pastor at the time, he sat me down and he showed me all the things he had to do in order to raise funds for the church. Had to get on a plane, speak at this conference, go to this church, raise money here, all the fundraising while trying to be a full-time father, while trying to be a full-time pastor and a full-time fundraiser. It was crazy because I watched his life. I was with him. He discipled me, so on and so forth. So that kind of just, for some reason, I am the person that if everybody has diabetes, for example, I want to go study sugar because what is the cause of this thing, right? So that's just how I look at life. So when I was looking, I was like, we don't just have a mission problem, we got a money problem. Because everybody's talking theology and mission. And I'm like, okay, cool, that's good. I went to Bible college too, right? But we have more than a mission problem. We have a money problem. And so I just went and studied money. I read every book that I could on faith and finance, read every book that I could on anything in the intersection between business and finance, discovered this whole thing called business as mission that's happening overseas, and was wondering why some of those creative things weren't happening here in the States. And so I just went down a rabbit hole to try to understand why we don't have enough money to plant churches in poor communities. Because I felt like that was close to the heart of Christ. So why isn't it happening? Yeah. Why is it not happening? So anyway, that's kind of how it started. Then that kind of led me on to a personal finance journey where me and my wife ended up digging out of 6 figures worth of debt. Took us 2 years to do that. And so we did that. And then it kind of just grew and grew and grew in terms of my desire toward finance. And so I kind of landed on being a financial advisor because people were telling me, you talk about this stuff all the time. And so I for many years, I did budget coaching, all for free. I did financial coaching. Now I know what the name is, but back then I just was helping people figure out money and budgeting and so on and so forth. And so eventually I went and got registered and as a financial advisor, and now I'm here.
Wow. Quick question. I kind of want to go down this route is, and I might have the question later, but we might cover it right now because
it's all good. It's all good.
So the Dave Ramsey thinks like cut everything, budget. But oftentimes it's to me, it's not a debt problem. It's sometimes an income problem. Like how can you produce more income, right? And he doesn't talk about that a lot, right?
No.
Where I think that is key. Like if you really want to get out of debt, get more income. So just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think Dave Ramsey speaks to a large sector of society that is going to continue to work, maybe find a part-time job, work full-time, but not necessarily thinking about income generation, multiple streams of income, so on and so forth. They're going to make the most of their 401k or 403b at the job. And if that's the case, then I think that system can work. But you're right in that there's 3 ways to fix a money problem: increase income, decrease expenses, pay less taxes to Uncle Sam. Those are the main 3. And so, increasing income is a big one. It's a part of what frustrates me sometimes with being in the church space is that's not a possibility, right? And it's also not a mentality, right? So you have. Let's just take pastors for example. You have 2 different mentalities. You have Paul, and you have Peter's. Paul is an income streamer. He goes out, he makes tents, he does anything he has to do in order to generate enough income for his particular mission. Peter is going to get paid by the church. Neither are wrong, but they are different. Right? And so I think Dave Ramsey speaks to a certain sector, and but I do think it is important to talk to people about income generation. I think it's important to talk to them about gaining more skills because skills pay the bills. Yep. I think so on and so forth. But that's not necessarily, he's an entrepreneur, but he's not really speaking to entrepreneurs.
Yeah. But there's still the underlying mindset, right? Just because you're making more money just doesn't mean you're going to be smart with money. There's a reason you got into debt in the first place. So let's fix those issues, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not so cut and dry to just make more money, because if you got into debt because of poor money management habits, you're the lottery winners. We see it, right? They get all that money and then they're broke. So.
Yeah, as my sister says, more money doesn't necessarily fix a money problem. And I also do want to say this: Dave has helped a lot of people. I used Dave's stuff when I first got started. I think when it comes to like the messaging about debt and so on and so forth, for most consumer debt, that is. I think it's some good stuff, but he's pretty one-dimensional. And that one dimension has helped some people, and for others, it's not the case. But he's done some good, but he is limited. Dave is not a financial advisor, but he has a lot of good things to say, and some things I agree with, and some things I don't.
Yeah, I have to agree. He's helped a lot of people. I mean, the evidence is there of all the testimonials he has, and so I definitely applaud him and props to him,
including me. So I was a baby step. I got on a baby step too, and
nice.
But so yeah, he was helpful to me as well to get going.
So the next staple of our interview is called the secret question. So the secret question for you is: what is the secret to being financially healthy without being greedy?
I think the answer to that is modesty. Modesty is the secret, where you get in between stewardship and greed. And so I think, and why do I say modesty is because one of the most dangerous things is lifestyle creep. What you'll learn in finance and in money, just in matters of money, it's not about how much you make. We just said that. It is about how much you keep. The challenge is every time you make more, if your lifestyle expenses increase at the rate that your expenses, and at the rate at which your revenue increases, if your expenses increase, your revenue increase, your expenses increase, then you end up not actually keeping more money. But if you can maintain a certain lifestyle and be modest in that lifestyle and raise your revenue, now you have a gap that we can work with to ensure that we buffer for future financial circumstances or situations that we need to plan for.
Yeah, it's all about the gap.
It's about the gap.
Yeah, that's awesome, because there's people that I know in stories that they make a lot of money, they go buy a Lamborghini, but then they think, why did I even buy that?
Correct. Right? Yeah. And it was for the thrill of the moment, and then eventually the thrill is gone, but the car note is still there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So now let's dive into your expertise a little bit. We've already been diving into your expertise, but let's go there a little bit more. So what are some common financial planning mistakes you see in business, between business owners and nonprofits, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah. So one common mistake that I see is disorganized businesses.
Hmm.
Disorganized. And what I mean by that is just not properly, um, no retirement plans really set up.
Hmm.
Um, I love entrepreneurship. I am an entrepreneur. I've also been an employee. I can tell you we work much harder. A lot of times entrepreneurs work much harder. Not to discount or discredit how hard you can work oftentimes as an employee. But entrepreneurs oftentimes, if they're launching their own business, they end up working more hours than 9 to 5. The challenge, though, is not being organized in terms of taking the reins of their future. And so what I see is that when you were an employee, for example, you had a lot of protections. Maybe you were aware of them, maybe you weren't. Some of those protections would include life insurance. You had a employer-sponsored retirement plan and a 401k or 403b at work, something of the sort. So there were certain things set up for you automatically to be paying into your retirement, automatically cover it in terms of insurance. Some people have short-term disability, long-term, all of those things. But when you come into the entrepreneur space, it is like going from the zoo to the wild. It is a lot more freedom, but it's a lot scarier out here too.
Yeah.
And so what I try to tell business owners to do specifically is make sure you take care of yourself, because you no longer have the protection of being employed. So those things that you were doing, 401k contributions, you have to continue that. Now, it might look different as a business owner. You choose something like a simple IRA, a SEP IRA, whatever you decide to choose. Solo 401k, right? There's options there, but you still need to be taking care of your short-term disability, ensuring you have some insurance in place so that you are properly buffered now that you're out in the wild.
Okay, nice. So my question about that is, people start businesses and they forget to do a lot of things. They have an idea. They're initially not great business owners. They just have an idea and want to grow something.
Yes.
So a lot of times that isn't even top of mind. So what is your advice for, like, is there a revenue level that they should hit that they should start considering this, or should it be right out the gate? What's your advice on that?
Start now, start fast, start early, start.
Nice.
What you don't want to do is get into this mentality of, and I have done this, where when I get to this point, I will start doing X. Not when it comes to things like health and finance. You don't want to say to yourself, hey, when I get to this point, I'll start going to the gym 30 minutes a day or whatever. No, start now. You don't want to say, hey, once I get to this point, I'll start contributing to my Roth IRA or my SEP IRA or whatever I have. No, start now, because time is ticking.
And start with whatever you have, right?
Start with whatever you have. With whatever you have. I don't care if it's $50 a month, because what I'm trying to get built into your understanding is the habit of doing it, even in the small ways, because those that are faithful over little are also faithful over what? Over much.
A lot.
So if you start the habit when you have a little bit, then that habit grows when you have a lot of it.
Yep.
Right. And so start now. Don't wait. Do not wait. Start with exactly with what you got. And you'll be surprised how much you can do with small contributions month to month.
Nice. So I know that you can help people with that. We'll get to all that later with a call to action. Come see what you can do for them. But my question around that is, do you help them no matter where they're at? Like what level?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Now, in my business, there are different flavors and styles of financial advisor, and some people won't talk to you unless you got 250,000. And somebody literally just told me that earlier this week. So they were asking me what my thresholds are and so on and so forth. We Thrivent, I will work with you no matter where you're starting. So if you're just getting started, you're not sure, then let's just do a full-fledged financial review. Right? We'll do, and then you might walk away from that with a bunch of free information and do absolutely nothing with it, but you have a bunch of free info. But if you're not sure where to get started, then we'll help you get started. in terms of on all fronts, whether that be the insurance side, whether that be the investment side, whether that be retirement planning. We do the whole kit and caboodle. But I think it's important to note that I really like working with people as they kind of get going, because I know if we do this the right way, I'll be there with them for the next 30 years and I'll be able to see the growth happens. The other thing that really, really matters to me is I personally love working with believers. And I love working with believers with a dream. I don't care if they have a job or a business or a nonprofit. Believers with a dream are just it for me, because we get to actually work together to see that dream come through. And I'm a believer with a dream. And so whether that's a dream for my kids, a dream for the church, a dream for some missional project, a dream for your business, like I like working with, just show up with $1 and a dream and we can get going.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
So little later, we're going to, well, a little later, if you're watching this, that will already be below, like ways to contact Edward to get on his calendar or however you want. I think you might even have some kind of special thing to offer them. I'm not sure, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but yeah, we'll talk about it.
So the next question is, how do you integrate strategic financial planning with unique needs of nonprofit organizations?
Yeah, now that's a tricky one, because oftentimes, if you think about what a nonprofit is, it's oftentimes defined by what it's not instead of what it is. And so the mission of the nonprofit has to be at the forefront, not the definition of being a nonprofit. Because and the reason why I said it is because just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you don't need profit. Because I've never met a nonprofit that doesn't need profit.
Yeah,
right.
It's kind of
so we kind of got it. And it is a misnomer. And the reason why I'm saying is because what I'm getting at is we got to get out of the mentality of thinking this is not about money. It is, because your nonprofit runs off of money. I worked in the church for 5 years, right? We never 1 year got up into front of the church and says, hey, nobody has to give this year. We're a nonprofit. You know what I mean? Like, no, that never happens. It's as a church, and I've been on the boards. I've seen the profit loss statements. We still have profit loss statements in churches, because it still costs church's salary, pastor's salary, worship leader salary, rent, so on and so forth. So what I'm saying is, let's not pretend like it doesn't matter. It matters, first off. Second of all, no matter what amount you have, no matter if you're in a for-profit business or a nonprofit, you still have stewardship responsibilities. And so I was in a conversation not too long ago with somebody, just telling them, hey, let's get a business budget for this nonprofit, so we know how much to pay ourselves out of it. And so what I'm trying to say is, no matter, you still have to have a responsibility of knowing your numbers. I did a talk for pastors, and I told them the exact same thing. Know your numbers. For in the nonprofit world, it may be a different type of number, but you still have to have accounting responsibility in knowing your numbers. And so there's QuickBooks for nonprofits too, for those that are familiar with QuickBooks, right? And so it's still a matter of accounting. And so I think just that's what balances out. Remember, being a pastor and being a financial advisor, my head is full and my heart is full. I am a for-profit and a nonprofit in my entity within myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. I have a nonprofit heart and I have a for-profit mind. And I think you need a little bit of the balance of the two, because the for-profit could drive you crazy if it has no heart. Right. That's crony capitalism and all the things we complain about. Right. But if the nonprofit has a heart full, but no financial mind, it is not sustainable. I promise you.
Oh, I love that. So I think often it is lost on the congregation in a church that the church needs money. Like,
yes,
we may just go down this tithing.
Yeah, let's go
for a minute.
Yeah, let's go.
Because the congregation like they're thinking this church is nonprofit. It's just going to exist whether I give any money or not. That's not necessarily true. So can you talk about what your thoughts are on tithing, and how let's even talk about how it's played a role in your life.
Yeah, I am a believer in the tithe. Now, let me quantify that statement. I've been to Bible college. I know theology at least decently well. So I know that the idea of telling someone that if you don't pay your tithes, you'll be cursed with a curse is not a New Testament philosophy. However, the law is good if you use it lawfully. That's what Paul says. I believe the lawful use of the tithe is to use it as a guiding principle for a minimum gift. I'm not mandating it, but what I find is that when there is no teaching on tithing and you just say grace giving, which I believe in grace giving with the principle of a tithe as a guide, meaning and when I say a guide, I mean practically speaking, right? When we teach our people to give, what number are we going to give them? If we say whatever number, like when I teach my children to tithe. Because if I teach them it's whatever's in your heart, people give 2%. The numbers show it. And so what ends up happening is the argument against the tithe results in most people not giving anything that is sacrificial.
Yeah.
Now I can argue against the tithe theologically because of the New Testament, but practically speaking, I still use it. I hope I'm making myself clear with that. That's what I believe in it. That's what I'm teaching my children. That's what I teach my disciples. That's what I've taught in the church. I use it as a guide. I can't mandate it. It is not law. You won't be cursed if you don't do it. But as a minimum, and then anything beyond that, we're thinking about giving to the point where it feels sacrificial to you. But we got to start at the 10% mark, in my opinion.
Yeah. Just to kind of give you some of my personal background, and I think it's all about heart, right? So when my business was struggling, there was like many years ago, my business was brand new, but my car was towed, right? Our only family vehicle. And you know what? We were not tithing. Okay. Once this was the point we really had nothing to tithe. We started tithing. The business started to take off. Now this is just, I'm not saying if you start tithing, your business is going to explode. But there is something there of where your heart is. Like, it's not my money. God, it's your money.
Yeah.
Right. Do with it as you see fit. Right.
Yeah. And there's a proverb that speaks about that. I teach my kids Proverbs. And I tell them a story, but the story is based on a proverb which says, I'm paraphrasing this, but the person who holds on tightly to their money has less, and the person who gives it away has more. Right? That's a super paraphrase. Yeah. But the idea there is, listen, sometimes when you cheat and you're not generous, sometimes you end up with holes in your pocket. You don't even know how how that money just got away from you. But sometimes when you give away more, you end up with more back. And it is God's way of controlling life. And the math doesn't even make sense for that.
No.
But God outmaths the math and generosity and giving. Yeah. I prescribe to, if I'm ever feeling like I'm having financial problems, it's time to give. That's just my mindset now. Because I know it's probably something in my heart that is causing that financial problem. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Awesome. So you've been involved with financial seminars and conferences. What's one piece of financial advice that tends to surprise people the most when they hear it?
I got 3.
Okay, awesome.
Taxes, and more taxes.
Nice.
Yeah, if most people have watched enough TikTok videos and YouTubes to know generally about the importance of saving for retirement. They at least are aware. Many people are at least aware of it. They might not be doing it, but they're at least aware of it. Typically, what they're not necessarily aware of is the importance of taxes. And how, if you don't plan for taxes, your biggest beneficiary will be your uncle.
Oh,
Uncle Sam.
Yep.
Right. So if you don't plan for that, then you'll be giving a lot of money away in taxes. If you don't position your money and put it in the right places. And so when I talk to people about the low tax strategy for retirement, or if I talk to them about Roth conversions or things like this, and how we do, and what is tax planning, and how, I sat down with one person and over $500,000 could be saved in taxes if we did things this way. Like the type of things, people are shocked when it comes to tax planning.
Yeah. Oh, wow. We could go down that rabbit hole too about but we'll actually not go down that because I feel like that could be a long conversation about
Yeah.
like the tax laws, tax loopholes, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
But it's set up for the smart people about taxes.
And it's set up for business owners, right?
Yep.
The people who are going to employ others.
Yep.
And that's sort of how the system works, right? And what we're talking about, as my sister would say, is you learn the rules of the game and you play the game by the rules.
Yep.
And so that's tax planning.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you said, it's for the businesses. The government really wants businesses to be successful. That's why they
Correct.
give them tax laws to help them be more successful.
Correct.
So, awesome. Let's dive into your faith now. You ready for this?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. How does your faith influence your approach to financial advising?
That's a good one. I think the thing that kind of comes to mind is a heavy emphasis on generosity.
Mm.
And my particular field tends to be very, very selfish. Because if I sit down with a business owner, a pastor, a family, then what could tend to happen is I could just create a plan for their selfishness. And in some respects, that's a lot of what we do. And what I mean by selfishness is we just create a financial plan to get you rich. Mm. And for you to preserve that wealth as long as possible for your own personal enjoyment. Mm. And there's some of that we have to do because that's a part of the process, meaning I have to get you to a certain level of income, a certain level of wealth, if you will, in order to see to it that your personal needs are taken care of. For example, if you're a business owner in retirement, I have to get you to a certain number because nobody else is coming to help you, mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So I have to make sure that what we have takes care of you. But where faith comes into play is beyond your personal needs, now what? Mm-hmm. Now what? Yeah. Because what I want to be able to do is be faithful to take care of your financial needs, but then what else do you desire to do? Do you want to see to it that we build generational wealth? Because that's outside of your, right? Now that's a second layer. Mm-hmm. Do we want to be sure that you take care of your parents that are aging? That's a third layer. Do you want to give something to the church? That's a fourth layer, right? Do you want to give to mission abroad or a cause that is really on your heart, whether that be adoption or whatever the circumstance might be, right? That's a fifth layer. Mm-hmm. So where faith comes into play is faith says, we're going to come up with a financial plan for you because we cannot do all of these other four layers without taking care of home base. But once we take care of you, now what? What would God have you to do with your money outside of paying your own bills and eating, drinking, and being happy? Yeah, it's hard to give from an empty cup, right? So absolutely. So awesome. Well, do you have a favorite biblical principle around money? Yeah, it's pretty much what I just shared with you, but I'll give you a verse, a chapter in the book of Luke, chapter 12. Jesus happens to be telling a story, and he tells a story because somebody comes up to him and says, "Rabbi, can you make my brother share the inheritance with me?" Mm. And so Jesus then proceeds to say, be careful of greed. Mm. Then he tells a story about the rich fool who had a great increase in his business. He has an agricultural business. He's a farmer. And man, it rained well that year and the seeds grew. And he already had savings. Right? He had enough in his barn. Mm-hmm. And he said, you know what, man, my harvest has been so good. I'm going to tear these barns down. I'm going to build bigger barns. Mm-hmm. And all I'm going to do is eat, drink, and be happy. And then eventually the Lord says to him, this night your soul will be required of you. And whose will these riches be? And the problem with the rich fool is, and I'm going to be honest, reading the story, he doesn't sound that bad to me. But the problem the scriptures tell us in Luke 12 is that he was not rich toward God. Mm-hmm. So when I said to you earlier, there's different levels and layers of things that we can do with money. He never got past level one of taking care of himself. He never got past level one. So I think the scriptures encourage me as a financial advisor to help push people past their own personal expenses and to figure out how to make the most of their money so that they are rich toward God.
All right, so let's kind of work off that rich towards God for a minute, because this often happens. When we are struggling, we get close to God, right? When we have financial struggles, we have health struggles, whatever struggles we may have, we tend to, oh God, I need you now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When we start to get comfortable, we start to pull away from God. So let's kind of, I have, this is something that I've been working on in my own life, right? To not have that back and forth with God. God, I don't want to I don't want to lose my relationship with you when I get comfortable, right? God, I do want your blessings. I do want to, I love when you take care of me, but I don't want that to be at the sacrifice of our communication and our relationship. So I just love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it comes down. So that's a normal thing. Jesus said it's hard for a rich person to enter into the kingdom. And if we're honest with ourselves and we actually did a world wealth calculator on how much money we make versus the world, then we will realize that the least of us in America is most of us in America, and the least of us in America is in the top 7% of the world. So that means most of us are richer than 93% of the rest of the world. So we are the ones that Jesus was referring to.
Yeah.
That's a sobering reality, by the way, and it takes a minute to kind of get there, but we move beyond that. And also when the children of Israel got into the land, one of the things he warned them about was, hey, when you build your houses and your farms are doing good, don't forget, I am the Lord your God. So the only way that I know to do this in business and with a drive to actually be successful in business is to take the Lord with you along the way every day. Mm-hmm. And not to just be dependent on your strategy, your marketing skills, your ability to sell, your ability to recruit and prospect and talk to customers, your ability to scale, but to actually pray about all of those things that are happening in your business, to bring them to God along the way. So what I'm telling you to do is consistent, daily, humble prayer, and to bring even your business concerns to the Lord, and don't leave him out of the process, even as you're scaling and sailing and all of those particular things we do in business and marketing and videos and media and all of our strategies. Let's keep it bowed before the Lord in prayer.
Yeah, and gratitude, because without him, you wouldn't have gotten there.
Correct.
So we owe it all back to him.
Yeah. And we gotta put that before him on a consistent basis, and not leave him out of the process. Yeah,
awesome.
Acknowledge the Lord in all things. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So, talk a little bit about your career and your journey, a little bit more about how God has played a role in shaping that for you.
Yeah, I think coming as a kid in 2010, who the only thing that I wanted to do in the world in terms of a profession was pastor. I think the Lord has opened up the reality to me that he is more than just the Lord of the pastors. In other words, like there's more for his people to do missionally than just be in full-time ministry. And I enjoyed my time in full-time ministry. I will always be somewhere pastoring and preaching, but I'll also be out in the marketplace, if you will. And so I think recognizing that God is God over the world and not just over the church, that he is God of the universe, right? That he is a prophet, he's a preacher, but if you read Genesis, you learn a lot more about who God is. He's an artist, he's a geologist. He put Adam to sleep and created Eve, so he's an anesthesiologist and a surgeon. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so there's a lot more elements and aspects to who he is that we get to reflect that in our different fields, right? God is in the marketing. How do I know? Because he inspired Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to tell the story about Jesus, and a story that we would never have, right? So that's media. That's the form of media in that day. So there's many different components of who God is and what he encourages us to do. He's got a best-selling book. Yes, he does. He's a best-selling. The Spirit of God is a best-selling author. You know
Of
what I
all
mean?
time.
Literally, yeah, of all time, like that. It's quite literally. And so,
Yep.
he's a project manager. He's like, I mean, we can go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why I say this is because whatever your business is, whatever your sales, if you're coaching, if you're whatever you're doing, like you have the ability to reflect God in that, because there's an element of who God is that is reflected in what you're doing to benefit and profit the world.
Wow. Thank you so much, Edward. I learned so much about you today, and I just learned a lot. So it's awesome. I'm glad we became friends.
Yeah.
So I know you have some place for people to go to check out what to work with you. So where can we send people?
Yeah. So you can, I'm edward.robinson@thrivent.com. I'm sure they can put that up somewhere. The other thing is, people can text me. Like I got a real phone number. People can actually text me. So you can text me at 434-448-3330. The thing that I offer to people is, and I think this is most important, is a fully free financial review. And so I'll look at whatever it is. We'll look at retirement analysis plan. Like, are you saving enough money for the future?
Mhm.
Right. We want to be able to answer the question, are you properly protected? Do you have enough insurance in place? We also want to be able to answer the question, how's your budget? Let's do a budget review and look at that. And so those are a couple of things we look at. For those that have jobs, we'll look at employment plans. And then if you have a small business, we'll look at, hey, do you have a solo 401k or a SEP IRA in place? So that's it. And some people end up working with me after that, and some people don't. It's no strings attached. It'll be up to you. But that's the most benefit that I can offer to people with some of the tools that we have. And I look forward to continuing to work with believers, especially because if I'm going to spend a lot of time making money and making sure that you have enough money, I would love to continue to do it for those that have kingdom purposes in mind.
Nice. So that is pretty awesome. And I would say that even if you think you're good financially, just get with Edward to see, because he might be, it's always good to have another pair of eyes, right?
Sure.
Especially someone with Edward's expertise. So it'd be worth it just to sit down with him and say, okay, I think I'm good, but what do you see? Right.
Yeah. And also, even if sometimes people who come to me, they already have a financial advisor. And the reason why they would come at, because I ask them, hey, when's the last time you sat with your advisor? Oh, it's been a while, so on and so forth. Okay, cool. Like let's look at that too. And I don't take clients away from good advisors. But sometimes people come to me because they want a second opinion. Hey, my advisor said this. What do you think? Type of deal. And so we work all across the spectrum.
Yeah. And if you're a believer, it's always good to work with other believers, especially when you're dealing with things you have to be really trustworthy with as far as finances. So awesome. Thank you again. I do ask one last question, and you've shared so much wisdom already. I don't know how, you probably have tons more, but what words of wisdom do you have to impart on anyone as a final gesture?
Be modest and keep your eyes on Christ. Money comes and money goes. We want to try to create plans and systems and strategies so we keep at least most of it. But at the end of the day, we can't be defined by it. And I think that's really important. So modesty, so that in the gap, we can be a lot more of blessing to others than we are to ourselves. And I think that is at the epitome of what it means to be Christian, is to do more for others for the sake of Christ.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you want to get more of that gap so you can have more income impacts, get with Edward and he can help you widen that gap. So
absolutely.
Awesome. So all the information you need to get a hold of Edward will be in the show notes or just somewhere below this video. If you're watching it on video, if you're listening to it, it will be in the show notes. So make sure to connect with Edward. And until next time, entrepreneurs, keep moving forward.
Amen.